Tonight at 10, Ofgem, the energy regulator, is set to announce the biggest ever rise in energy bills. From April, households could face the prospect of gas and electricity costs rising by as much as 50%.
A single mum with limited income, it's very difficult to even turn that button on just now, the central heating.
The Ofgem announcement is due tomorrow, and ministers are considering offering financial help to some energy firms, also tonight. In Northern Ireland, ministers say there'll be no more checks on goods coming from the rest of the UK from midnight tonight. This young man ended his life having found a website with suicide advice. A bill going through Parliament is said to be too weak to tackle the online threat. And as the Six Nations Championship approaches, the Duchess of Cambridge starts her new role as patron of England's Rugby Football Union and League.
And coming up in the sport on the BBC News Channel, Celtic and Rangers go head-to-head in the Old Firm derby at Celtic Park. Can the home side seal the win to take them top?
Good evening. Ofgem, the energy regulator, is set to announce the biggest ever rise in energy bills, with ministers understood to be preparing measures to ease the pressure on households. The announcement is due tomorrow. Every 6 months, Ofgem reviews the maximum price that suppliers in England, Wales and Scotland can charge customers on the standard tariff. Now, around 15 million households saw their bills go up by 12% when the last update happened in October. The new cap takes effect in April, and industry predictions are that energy prices could rise by as much as 50%, taking the average annual bill to roughly £2,000. There is a separate energy market in Northern Ireland where prices have also risen sharply. Two energy firms have told the BBC today that the government is planning to give them loans to help reduce bills for some customers. Our social affairs correspondent Michael Buchanan reports now from Glasgow.
I'm lucky if I have breakfast kind of middle of the afternoon to keep me going and a snack at night.
Having cut down on food, Zahada Zaftar is now facing reducing her fuel. The hot water bottle eases the pain from her severe arthritis as she can't afford to properly heat her flat after a 20% rise in bills.
A single mum with limited income, it's very difficult to even turn that button on just now, the central heating.
How often do you put it on?
Kind of every other day for about half an hour.
Around 1 in 4 homes in Scotland are in fuel poverty, the highest level in the UK, and those groups offering help have been inundated in recent weeks.
You can't even afford to turn your heating on, you're just using your water. Do you have children in the house?
At this support centre, they say rocketing energy prices, rising food costs and the £20 a week cut to universal credit have combined to create real struggles.
Some people are borrowing, some people are just, they're deciding, do I eat tonight or do I put it into my heating? Do I go without food for X amount of days to be electricity to be able to give my children a hot bath?
This mum of 3 needed help with food and fuel from the hub after her energy prices more than doubled.
I've just bought some groceries there and I'm left with £15 to take me to next week. I'm trying to feed 3 kids, plus put £70 in the metre. It's nearly impossible.
Colder weather and poor energy efficiency mean many Scottish consumers were already struggling with their bills. Various government programmes like the Warm Home discount do help, but reports of further aid have been welcome.
You know, people are already struggling, so anything that eases that pressure on households is really welcome, and especially if it's targeted effectively at households that are most vulnerable.
Down with a big bang. Unfortunately, we lost 3 of our garage windows in the process.
Gary Shields' house looks onto the Longannet power station. He worked there before it was decommissioned, but he now relies on a charity, the Fuelbank Foundation, to heat his home. Spinal cancer ended his career. Looming price rises add to the stress.
If we talk about 50% increase on the bills, you know, we don't have the ability to meet those needs, so we'll be basically on our own.
The irony of living by a former power station while being in fuel poverty isn't lost on Gary Shields. He fears a gloomy future, so if government help is coming, Like all consumers, he wants it quickly. Michael Buchanan, BBC News.
Our business editor, Simon Jack, is here. We heard there, Simon, about the real anxiety that there is in so many households about what's coming up. When we mention government help, what's that likely to be?
The plan that's emerging and that company bosses I've spoken to are expecting has two parts. The first, a near universal cut in energy bills across the board. Could be £200, that figure's been mentioned, could be a bit more. That would be funded by loans from the government to the energy companies, which they would pass straight through. But they would recoup that in future years. And so you would bake in, if you like, higher prices for longer over those intervening years. The second, an expansion of the eligibility criteria and the generosity of certain schemes, for example, warm home discount scheme, perhaps some tweaks to benefits. Now, they describe this as credible, doable, and they're expecting it to happen. But problems and questions remain. Problem one, if it is £200, that's not going to make up the £600 or £700 rise that people are going to see, so it's not going to be enough for many people. The second one, with this loan system, it defers but does not remove the pain, and it also relies on the fact or the assumption that wholesale energy bills or costs are going to be much lower in years to come, and that isn't something that energy experts think is far from certain, in fact actually pretty unlikely, and that's before you consider what's going on in Ukraine. And the third thing I'm hearing is that they're wondering, up to now, energy bosses said they've been slightly in the dark about what the Treasury are doing. And they're saying, you're going to need our involvement in this. These are going to be quite complex things to implement. We're not sure we have enough time to put them in place before the bills rocket, we've just heard there, on April the 1st. And bear in mind, Citizens Advice said today they're having record numbers of people consulting them about energy difficulties, and that's before we've seen the impact of this price rise. So just an indication of how acute this cost of living squeeze could really be.
Indeed. Simon, many thanks again. Simon Jack there, our business editor. Now, in Northern Ireland, the Agriculture Minister, Edwin Poots, has ordered his officials to stop carrying out checks on goods entering Northern Ireland from the rest of the UK from midnight tonight. Checks had been carried as part of the Brexit deal, known as the Northern Ireland Protocol. Mr Poots is a member of the Democratic Unionist Party, which is opposed to that protocol, which in effect keeps Northern Ireland in the EU single market. Our Ireland correspondent, Emma Vardy, has more details.
It's the most defiant step yet from the DUP to frustrate the Brexit arrangements in Northern Ireland. Since the UK left the EU, goods from Britain have had to undergo new checks when they reach Northern Ireland's ports. Tonight, the DUP minister, whose department is responsible for operating these checks, has ordered civil servants to stop carrying them out.
I've now issued a formal instruction to my permanent secretary to halt all checks that were not in place on the 31st of December 2020 from midnight tonight. I'll prepare a paper for executive consideration in the near future to seek agreement on a way forward. Thank you.
The new checks on goods crossing the Irish Sea were part of the Brexit deal that the UK government signed up to avoid the need for checks on goods which travel into the Irish Republic. For unionists who view this as effectively severing Northern Ireland's place in the UK, they've been a source of much contention. But it's an arrangement which is supported by other parties in Northern Ireland. The government in Dublin says ordering the checks to stop goes against an international treaty.
The protocol is part of an international agreement. It was agreed and ratified by the UK and the EU, and so to deliberately frustrate obligations under that treaty, I think would be a very serious matter indeed. I think it's essentially playing politics with legal obligations.
What's not clear tonight is how civil servants who are responsible for border checks here will react tomorrow. There's conflicting views in the Northern Ireland government over whether the order is lawful. And the first lorries carrying goods will begin to roll off the ferries here just after 6 a.m. Other parties at Stormont have accused the DUP of a political stunt ahead of the elections in May. More than a year since the Brexit arrangements were put in place, they're still at the heart of political division and uncertainty.
Well, for the moment, it appears that the UK government isn't going to intervene, saying that the operation of the checks here is a matter for the Northern Ireland executive. But that approach isn't going to make the EU happy at all. One EU diplomat telling the BBC tonight that it feels that the country of law and order is in danger of becoming lawless. Now, of course, what happens tomorrow, we'll have to wait and see when civil servants turn up for work here. But this is all happening while at the same time the EU and UK are negotiating to try and make life easier when it comes to the Brexit arrangements. This might just make the mood more difficult.
Emma, many thanks again for the latest there in the port of Belfast, Emma Vardy. The long-awaited plans for tackling regional inequality have been unveiled by the government at Westminster with the promise of better jobs, education, housing and transport for overlooked communities. The Cabinet Minister in charge, Michael Gove, said the aim was to close the gap between rich and poor by the end of the decade. Labour described the proposals as lacking in ambition and in funding. Our political correspondent Alex Forsyth has been to the constituency of Gedling in Nottinghamshire, which the Conservatives won from Labour back in 2019.
We need to tackle and reverse the inequality that is limiting so many horizons.
They tell us to wait till 2030, but where have they been?
Beyond Westminster, Gedling is one of those places some might say has been overlooked. So at this local allotment, the idea of growth in neglected parts of the country is welcome, though cautiously.
On paper it looks good. I think the ideas generally there are very sound. My doubt is always about this ability to put it into action.
This group has been paying attention. Nottinghamshire's one of the places in line for more powers from Westminster, possibly a mayor like those in London or Greater Manchester, all part of a plan to give places like this more political and economic clout. So are they convinced?
The things that people have been talking about as symbolising that, things like the electrification of the railway line up to Nottingham, HS2, they've disappeared before this thing's even started.
We've seen wish lists before. We need actual, how is this going to happen?
The government does have a list. Better transport is one of 12 missions. Others, more homeowners, improving education outcomes, better broadband, with fixed targets and pledges to keep track of progress. Ministers are trying to turn a slogan into a strategy, shed light on what's lacked clarity.
This country won't achieve its full potential until every individual and community achieves everything of which they're capable. Our economy has been like a jet propelled by only one engine. Now we need to fire up every resource we have. And the economic prize from levelling up is potentially enormous.
Labour, though, says this plan just repackages old ideas and spends money already announced that won't undo years of austerity.
Ministers scurrying around Whitehall, shuffling the deck chairs, cobbling together a shopping list of recycled policies and fiddling the figures. Is this really it?
Many communities have been made big promises, not least places that voted Tory in 2019. There has been a lot of political focus on places like Gedling in the Midlands and North. Now some in rural and coastal areas are warning they can't be overlooked. The government says this is about improving opportunity for everyone, but acknowledges that will take time. The question is whether people have the patience. Take Colette. She always backed the Conservatives, but says today's plan won't make a difference to the daily struggle for families and businesses like hers.
We want to see the funding. We don't want it trapped in a council balance sheet. We want it in our banks so that we can employ people, protect apprentices, actually pay people more. I think it's white noise.
Today was an attempt to shed light on what the government says is its key mission. The question, of course, will it cut it? Alex Forsyth, BBC News, Nottinghamshire.
Well, 3 more Conservative MPs have publicly called for Boris Johnson to resign as Prime Minister, and they've submitted letters of no confidence because of his handling of the scandal over the lockdown parties in Downing Street. 2 are former ministers, Tobias Ellwood and Sir Gary Streeter. A minimum of 54 is required to trigger a no-confidence vote. Our political editor, Laura Kuensberg, has the latest.
Does your party still back you, Prime Minister?
The fundamental question. If Boris Johnson's party wants him out, his power to live in this street, to stop the traffic, that all disappears. Turning up for the weekly bout to hear the opposition parties only too content to poke fun.
The Prime Minister has more chance of persuading the public that he didn't hold any parties than he has of persuading them that the economy is booming.
The Prime Minister
is now a dangerous distraction at home and a running joke on the international stage.
At the dispatch box, as in his party, he tried to keep control.
We are getting on with the job.
Yet, pondering in Parliament, one by one, more Tory MPs think his time is up. This former minister was never a huge fan, but believes Mr Johnson has to go.
Cut to the chase. Call a vote of confidence in himself. So everybody in the party, in the parliamentary party, can make a judgment today rather than allowing this car crash to continue.
And how many of your colleagues do you think share your views?
We don't see any solutions. We don't see any off-ramp to take us out of here. And you therefore have to go through the very miserable chapter of going through a leadership process.
Another MP, elected in 2019, Anthony Mangnall, said he couldn't put up with the Prime Minister's mistruths anymore. And then there were three. Gary Streeter, elected in 1992, wrote he can't reconcile the public's pain with what happened in Number 10. The BBC's aware of 17 Tory MPs, some private, some public, who have submitted letters of no confidence to try to trigger a contest, far from the 54 the would-be rebels require. But it's on many others' minds.
I've given it serious thought.
And has told the Prime Minister as much.
I don't think it's irreparable, but we can't afford any more slip-ups, mistakes, misspeaks.
Can you say hand on heart today that Boris Johnson will be the leader who takes the Conservatives into the next election?
No, I can't. No, I can't.
And ought he to be?
Ought he to be? I don't know the answer to that.
The Prime Minister's always had malcontents who refused to fall in line. And only 2 years ago, as ministers point out, achieved the brute force of an 80-seat majority.
You can't please everyone all of the time within your political party, let alone across the country. But look, I have confidence in the Prime Minister because I judge him by what he's delivered for the country.
Boris Johnson and his team are fighting to stay at the top. Yet each day brings more risk that his leadership could slip away. Laura Kunzberg, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, Boris Johnson has been speaking to President Putin of Russia today and warned him that a further incursion by Russian troops into Ukraine would be a tragic miscalculation. The Kremlin described the conversation as a detailed exchange of views. Meanwhile, President Biden confirmed the US will be sending more troops to Europe this week to bolster defences. Some 2,000 will be sent from the US to Poland and Germany. The further 1,000 troops already in Germany will go to Romania. Away from the military tension, what do Russian citizens think of the prospect of a full-scale war in Ukraine? Our correspondent Steve Rosenberg reports now from the city of Vladimir.
In Russia, Putin is but one of many Vladimirs. This is Vladimir, the town. It was founded by a medieval prince who ruled from Kiev, a reminder that Russia and Ukraine have common roots. Andrei's mother is from Ukraine. He calls the two countries brotherly nations, but he clearly sees Russia as big brother.
Russia must have a sphere of influence. It's a superpower. Smaller countries can ally with whoever they choose, but it's up to big countries to help them decide.
I find that many Russians do believe what they're being told. The constant stream of claims in the state media here that it's Ukraine and the West that risk turning a Cold War hot. At Vladimir Market, though, on people's minds are troubles on the home front. Economic ones. Lydia is trying to sell produce from her garden. The money she makes here is a lifeline. The situation in Ukraine is a worry, Lydia says, but so is the Russian economy. Prices are rising on everything. My pension's barely enough to survive on.
With all the problems Russians have right now, economic hardship, the coronavirus pandemic, there's little appetite here amongst the public for a full-scale war with Ukraine, let alone a war with the West. But that doesn't mean that Russians don't fear such a war. Many do.
With East-West tension, close to boiling point over Ukraine. I-10 and her husband Victor blame their government. They believe the Russian authorities have created imaginary enemies as a distraction.
So they want us to hate. They want us to imagine that there is an enemy, because there must be an enemy. Otherwise, people will focus on the problems they have and will be focusing on what's wrong, why they're not living the life they could live if the government would be different, if the policy would be different.
So, will Russia compromise, or will there be conflict? I-10 knows that will depend on the other Vladimir, Russia's current leader, back in Moscow. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Vladimir.
Just over 3 million people in the UK tested positive for COVID last week, according to the latest estimate from the ONS. That's a small rise on the week before. The number of people testing positive in England and Scotland remained unchanged, but it rose in Wales and Northern Ireland. The latest daily figures show 88,085 new cases recorded in the latest 24-hour period. On average, 89,148 new cases reported every day in the past week. The number of people in hospital with COVID has fallen to 15,233. A big rise in the number of deaths has been reported, 534 in the latest 24-hour period of people who died within 28 days of a positive test, though there will be some within this number who did not die of COVID. And by the way, today's figure is higher than usual as it includes deaths that took place after a reinfection. On average, in the past week, 258 deaths were announced every day. On vaccinations, more than 37.3 million have now had a booster jab, which means that 65% of people aged 12 and over have now had 3 vaccine doses. Now, the new online safety bill going through Westminster is not fit for purpose, according to the Samaritans charity, which is calling on the government to strengthen the proposed law to ban websites advocating suicide. They're backed by the family of Joe Nihill, who ended his life aged 23 after he found a website where other users told him how to buy poison. The government says the new bill will bring accountability to internet firms by giving them legal duties to protect UK users from harm. Our correspondent Angus Crawford has the story. There are some distressing details in it.
Imagine a website where the sad and lonely learn how to die. That website exists. And Joe Nihill, who was 23 and struggling with depression, found it.
Telling people to die, to take their life, it's not going to get any better. They're monsters.
Joe went looking for help, but was encouraged to end his life. The site even showed him where to buy the poison he used.
I've advised over 1,000 people how to end their life.
His mother, Catherine, and sister-in-law, Melanie, want it shut down, but it's still there, pulling in the desperate and the vulnerable.
Well, if Joe hadn't have found himself on there, we could have had a more fighting chance that he'd still be here. It needs to go. It needs banning.
The whole thing just needs to go.
It's disgusting.
We're not naming the site because we don't want others to find it. There are detailed instructions on suicide methods, even people posting their final messages. And there are users looking to find suicide partners to die together. Italy and Germany have restricted access to the site, but in the UK it's still freely available. We know of 21 suicides in Britain linked to this site, but there may be many more. Jeremy Keeling found the site and someone to sell him poison, sent all the way from Eastern Europe. But at the last minute, he didn't take it.
I know what it's like to be in a situation where you're in the darkest place you've ever been and you don't feel as though that will end. You feel as though there is no light at the end of the tunnel. Don't give up.
Jeremy is now recovering and well supported, but angry the authorities haven't done more to take the site down.
I think they're out of touch. I think they don't know the details of what's going on, to be honest with you. There is a site out there that is coaching British citizens on how to end their life, and something needs doing about it.
The government says it's already illegal to encourage or help someone to take their own life, and the new online safety bill will further strengthen legislation. But will it? Some charities don't think so.
In its present form, the bill isn't fit for purpose. It's very focused on under 18s, which is crucial, of course. We must protect our children. But we have to recognise that there are vulnerable adults. You don't stop having thoughts of suicide or self-harm just because you become 18 years old.
And it's signed Joe Nihill. Please do your best in closing that website for anyone else and look after my mum and my family.
I miss my son.
Joe left a note asking the police to shut down the website. His family say they won't stop until it and others like it are gone for good.
It's just there for anybody to find.
How many more lives are going to be taken before
they do something?
Angus Crawford, BBC News.
If you're suffering distress or despair and need support, maybe urgent support, a list of organisations that can help is available at bbc.co.uk/action line, or you can call free to hear recorded information on 0800 066 066. The Duchess of Cambridge has embarked on her new role as the patron of England's Rugby Football League and Rugby Football Union. The roles were previously held by Prince Harry, ended his relationship, of course, with the Games when he stepped down as a working royal. Our correspondent Sarah Campbell has the story.
Hoping to give English rugby a lift, the players were certainly impressed with their new patron's performance on the pitch.
She's seriously skillful. It was really impressive. Yeah, we thought we'd throw her in the scrum, so I'm not sure she loved it, but we threw her in there. No, she did. She was great.
Until last year, Prince Harry was English rugby's royal cheerleader. A lot's changed since this picture was taken back in 2015 at the World Cup.
With Prince Harry, his wife Meghan and now Prince Andrew all losing their royal patronages, the Queen and the family are working out which of the remaining royals are best placed to take on more positions.
And the captain of the women's team couldn't be happier with Harry's replacement.
I think women's rugby in this country is going to take off domestically and internationally, so yeah, hopefully to have her as an advocate and pushing it in that direction is really important.
England kits for the Cambridge children who are rugby fans, according to their mum. The only issue may be with Dad, as Prince William is the patron for Welsh rugby.
She said that they're pretty competitive in their household between the two of them, so she's not really too sure how it's going to go down when England play Wales.
During this Six Nations, expect the royal rivalry to be as fierce as that on the pitch. Sarah Campbell, BBC News, Twickenham.
We're looking forward to it. That's it. Now on BBC One, time for the news where you are. Have a good night.